A traditional leader returns from the Middle East, and within days the quiet routines of South Africa's royal world begin to shift. Flights land every day, leaders travel constantly, but this return lands differently. It carries weight, it carries timing, it carries consequences that extend far beyond airport terminals and official schedules. What follows is not just a series of meetings, not just ceremonial handshakes or polite conversations behind closed doors. It is a convergence of royalty, politics, legacy, and unfinished business. A meeting between King Dalindyebo and King Misuzulu, followed by engagement with Jacob Zuma, opens a chapter that many did not expect to read so soon, and one that could quietly redraw lines of influence that have existed for decades. Before the public statements, before the photographs, before the carefully worded press releases, there is a single question hanging in the air. When tradition, power, and politics intersect this closely, who is really steering the direction? The return of King Dalindyebo after his Israel trip immediately ignites speculation, not because international travel is rare, but because of what such journeys often represent. Trips like these are rarely limited to cultural exchange or spiritual reflection. They are also about exposure, access, and positioning. When a traditional leader steps onto a global stage, even briefly, they return home with more than experiences. They return with perspective, networks, and a recalibrated sense of their place in a changing world. Timing matters. This return does not happen in a vacuum. South Africa's traditional leadership structures are navigating tension, transition, and renewed scrutiny. Authority is no longer inherited unquestioned. It is debated, challenged, and tested by younger generations who demand transparency and relevance. Against this backdrop, any high-level engagement becomes amplified. Every move is read as intentional, every meeting as strategic. The Israel trip itself becomes part of the story, whether officially acknowledged or not. International engagements often elevate a leader standing at home, subtly reinforcing legitimacy. They signal recognition beyond borders, suggesting that local authority has global relevance. For supporters, this reinforces pride and confidence. For critics, it raises questions about alignment, influence, and purpose. Either way, the trip reframes how the leader is perceived upon return. Attention then shifts quickly to the planned meeting with King Misuzulu. On the surface, it appears straightforward, two kings engaging in dialogue, honoring protocol, reinforcing unity among traditional leaders. But history teaches that such meetings are rarely simple. The Zulu monarchy carries immense cultural gravity, not just within KwaZulu-Natal but across the country. Any engagement with it resonates politically, socially, and symbolically. King Misuzulu's position itself exists within a complex landscape of expectation and pressure. Leadership transitions within royal houses often expose fractures, both internal and external. Supporters seek continuity, while critics scrutinize every decision. When another prominent traditional leader steps into this space, the meeting becomes a mirror reflecting broader questions about unity, legitimacy, and shared direction. These encounters are as much about what is unsaid as what is spoken aloud. Tone, timing, and setting matter. A gesture of respect can signal alliance. A delay can suggest caution. Even the order of meetings carries meaning. In environments shaped by tradition, symbolism speaks fluently, often louder than official statements. The presence of Jacob Zuma in the sequence of engagements fundamentally alters the equation. Zuma is not merely a former president. He is a political figure whose influence extends deeply into traditional structures, liberation history, and populist sentiment. His relationship with the Zulu monarchy and traditional leadership is layered, built over decades of shared history, mutual benefit, and strategic alignment. When Zuma enters a conversation that involves kings, the boundaries between politics and tradition blur further. Supporters view this as continuity, a reinforcement of indigenous leadership intersecting with political experience. Critics see risk, interpreting it as the politicization of tradition for personal or factional gain. Both interpretations coexist, and both fuel the narrative. South Africa has witnessed this convergence before. Traditional leaders have long played roles in political mobilization, community influence, and electoral dynamics. During moments of uncertainty, politicians often turn toward traditional authority to stabilize support and legitimize messages. At the same time, traditional leaders navigate the challenge of preserving cultural integrity while engaging with modern power structures. Behind closed doors, discussions rarely focus on ceremony alone. Practical issues surface quickly. Recognition, resource allocation, land authority, community development, and political alignment often form the core of these conversations. The public may see smiles and formal greetings, but beneath them lie negotiations shaped by long-term calculations. Public reaction, however, tends to operate on a different rhythm. Communities respond emotionally, drawing conclusions from headlines, soundbites, and symbolic gestures. Elite actors, by contrast, think in timelines, leverage, and future scenarios. This gap between perception and intention is where misunderstandings, and sometimes manipulation, occur. Media framing becomes decisive at this stage. A meeting can be portrayed as reconciliation, consolidation, or controversy, depending on the narrative chosen. Once established, that narrative can be difficult to reverse. Leaders who understand this invest as much effort in managing perception as they do in shaping outcomes. Halfway through this unfolding story, one reality becomes clear. Attention itself is power. Engagement, discussion, and public scrutiny shape the space in which these leaders operate, influencing what becomes possible next. As the story deepens, risks begin to surface. One of the most common is the misreading of symbolism as substance. Ceremonial unity does not automatically translate into functional cooperation. Without follow-through, symbolism can quickly lose credibility, leaving communities disillusioned and skeptical. Generational dynamics intensify this risk. Younger South Africans increasingly question traditional and political authority alike. They are less moved by titles and more persuaded by transparency, opportunity, and tangible results. For them, meetings between kings and politicians are evaluated not by heritage but by impact. At a regional level, shifts in alliance often occur quietly before they become visible nationally. Provinces, factions, and local power centers adjust their positions subtly, responding to cues from high-profile engagements. These early movements often signal larger changes yet to come. History offers cautionary lessons. Past royal political alliances have delivered stability in some moments and deep division in others. The difference has rarely been intention, it has been accountability. Where mechanisms existed to manage power responsibly, alliances endured. Where they did not, fragmentation followed. International attention adds another layer. When traditional leaders engage globally, external validation can strengthen their domestic standing. It can also introduce new expectations and pressures. Global recognition amplifies influence, but it also magnifies scrutiny. As political seasons approach, every meeting is read as a prelude. Silence becomes strategic. Delays become deliberate. Observers learn to track sequences rather than statements, understanding that timing often reveals more than words. Fragmented leadership carries a cost. When authority is divided, negotiating power weakens. Unity, even temporary, can consolidate influence and create momentum. The challenge lies in sustaining that unity beyond symbolic moments. Ultimately, the bigger picture begins to emerge. This is not only about King Dalindyebo, King Misuzulu, or Jacob Zuma as individuals. It is about how authority itself is evolving. Tradition is adapting under modern pressure. Politics is seeking legitimacy through heritage, and power is reshaping its own foundations. As this chapter draws toward its close, one truth remains unavoidable. The meetings themselves are not the conclusion. They are signals, markers along a path still unfolding. What follows, in actions rather than words, will determine whether this convergence becomes a footnote or a turning point.